Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and today it's time for my thoughts on the first two books in my 20th century British and American horror project. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, time for a bit of horror today. These are the first two books in my 20th century British and American horror project. We've got The House on the Borderland by William Hope Hodgson and The Ceremonies by T.E.D. Klein. Before I get into the first of these, I will give the usual spoiler warning. I'm not going to be spoiling any plot twists or anything like that. But if you want to go in totally blind to either of these books, then do feel free to click away from this video and come back when you're done reading them. They will be timestamped as well, so if you want to hear my thoughts on one but not the other, then check out the timestamps and you can skip ahead to the relevant one for you. Okay, so let's start with The House on the Borderland then by William Hope Hodgson. So this is the UK pick for the month. This was written in 1908, and this is very much cosmic horror. So the synopsis for this then, it starts with two friends travelling the countryside in remote Ireland who find the ruin of an old house. A site which the locals won't even go near, which is never a good sign, is it? And there they find an old manuscript. They take it back to their camp. They are camping and fishing and hiking and all that kind of stuff. So they take it back to their camp where they read the manuscript, which relates through journal entries, essentially, the strange and unnerving experiences of an unknown reclusive narrator who lived a secluded life in this rundown house overlooking a terrifying chasm known as the Pit. And the recluse, along with his sister who lives with him and his dog, Pepper, there's a dog, they quickly discover that they are not alone and that their house sits rather precariously on the borderland between reality and a horrifying, unknowable realm. The house is attacked by these kind of grotesque humanoid swine-like creatures that come out of the pit, but these physical threats from the swine-like creatures are just the beginning of all the weirdness, because things soon shift to kind of a far more disturbing and kind of cosmic horror. So my thoughts on this one then, it was weird. It was weird, but I really liked it. It starts off feeling almost like a kind of a gothic haunted house type story. And I kind of thought, I thought I knew where it might go. But then it kind of shifts and goes in a whole other direction. It's weird. It goes from this kind of creepy, kind of gothic-y, as I say, almost haunted house type horror, with these weird swine-like creatures, to a sprawling sort of metaphysical horror and psychological sort of horror that comes in with that. And that, it kind of really scrambled my brain at times, some of that, and it's meant to. But it eventually did cycle back around, and everything mostly falls into place by the end, although I won't, pretend that I understood it all. But I don't think you either need to or should. I think, the incomprehensibility of the cosmic elements of it and stuff is kind of the point. You are in the same situation as the narrator in some respects. He can't understand it all, and it's happening to him. I really liked Hodgson's prose in this. There's some really enjoyable melodrama. There's some great dark wit, and there's some great kind of existential musing, or that I guess like grappling. might be a more appropriate term than musing. Um, it's very much of its era, the prose, and that's part of the charm of it for me, for sure. Um, there were a few sections where it was a bit more plodding, I think, but it never felt too slow. It didn't ever bore me or kind of lose my engagement or anything like that. I think some of the horror elements, like the swine creatures, can seem a bit daft at times, but I didn't mind that. I think, the first kind of instance where you get a description of them, they seem daft, but Hodgson was also really able to make them threatening when they're attacking the house, and there's more of them. Um, and I'm sure that despite the fact that the idea of them is a little bit silly, if I had a bunch of them trying to get into my house, I'd be pretty terrified. um, so yeah, that it might be a little bit daft at times or just weird, bonkers. But there definitely was tension there. There was definitely threat there. Um, Hodgson also did a decent job with the narrator character. I think he captures the kind of the instability of the man pretty well. But there's no major depth, I think, in the character work, and definitely no major depth at all in the few secondary characters that we get. So like the sister, or the men who find the manuscripts, things like that. What really shines in this is Hodgson's ideas, his weirdness, the weirdness of his mind, and what he's conjuring up here. The cosmic side of things is excellent. And considering when this was written, he was really ahead of his time. I think it's like Lovecraft doesn't come along for a little bit, and often is held up as kind of the king of cosmic. But Hodgson was an influence on Lovecraft. And yeah, some of the stuff in here, it's like when you consider this was written in 1908, then yeah, this is reasonably ahead of its time, I would say. So to sum everything up, then I would say that the strengths of this are the ideas in it, as I say, the cosmic horror ideas in it, and also the atmosphere. It had a really strong atmosphere to it for me. The weaknesses, the characters, are they're perfectly fine for what they need to be, but there's no major depth there. In terms of my enjoyment of it, yeah, I really liked this. As I say, I really liked this. It was very, very entertaining. And in terms of a rating that I will put on Storygraph, that's going to be a 4-star rating. Definitely recommend this one. So in terms of whether I'm going to read some more Hope Hodgson, yes, definitely. I've read this one, and I've read another short story by Hope Hodgson, which I really liked. Yeah, I will be diving back into more of his work for sure. I really like his stuff. So on to the second book then, and this one is The Ceremonies by T.E.D. Klein. This is the US pick, the American pick. This was written in 1984, so a little bit later into the 20th century. And this is predominantly folk horror, I would say, but this does have cosmic elements in it as well. So the synopsis for this one then. This follows Jeremy Frears, who is a graduate student and sort of university lecturer from New York City, who decides to spend his summer out in the remote New Jersey countryside, working on his dissertation, which is in Gothic literature, and preparing for the following sort of year's classes that he's got. And he finds what he thinks is a perfect place to stay in Gilead, or near Gilead, which is a small town home to a strict religious sect with very Puritan ideas. And he rents a room in an old outbuilding on a farm owned by Sar and Deborah Porrath. And he intends to spend a productive summer free from all of the distractions of the city, although things are not about to go his way. Just before he leaves New York as well, he meets a young librarian called Carol Conklin, and those two make a connection, and a romantic relationship develops between them. on somewhat strange terms. And the development of this relationship, this connection that has been made, is actually part of a grand and ominous plan uh, of a strange little old man called Mr. Rosebottom, or Rosie as he is known. Rosie has been waiting for a long time for the correct moments to enact this plan. And Jeremy and Carol are the unsuspecting pawns, essentially, in this plan that he intends to use to bring about its success. So, thoughts then? Yeah, I loved this one. It's a very slow build. It's a very slow book, and it builds over the whole length of the book. Really, it's 20 hours long on audio, just over, and it is constant tension. The sense of dread is always there. The characters in it, they're all really flawed. They're well developed. I really can't say that I liked Jeremy or Carol that much. Jeremy in particular, he's pretty arrogant and irritating a lot of the time. But they were interesting nonetheless because of that kind of that flawed nature, their flawed natures. And especially when you contrast them with Sar and Deborah Porrath as well. I think Sar was like the most intriguing character to me. I think in a lot of ways he's a very devout man, but he's educated. He's lived outside of the isolated community of Gilead before returning home to that community to run a farm. And kind of his internal conflict as well is really interesting in terms of how he's dealing with the expectations of the community and of his religion versus his education, and dealing with Deborah's kind of less than meek manner, shall we say, which is of course not is what expected of women in the strict sect in which they live. Yeah, that all makes him quite a fascinating character. And I think the conflict generally between the modern city life and the traditional rural kind of very religious life, the devout life that the sect lives, that was a kind of a key theme in here, and it was explored really well, I think, through the character relationships. The most enjoyable character, and probably the most like mysterious character for sure, was Rosie, Mr. Rosebottom. And man, was he creepy. Especially on the audio, the performance on the audio was really creepy at times. This little, like, harmless little old man who is anything but harmless. Yeah, he's a great character, really great character. I think there's an excellent sense of place evoked by Klein in this. The atmosphere in this is fantastic. Both in the kind of the rural setting and in the city sections that we experience as well. We do get some sections, some chapters that are set in the city with Carol. But yeah, the atmosphere is brilliant in this. One of my favourite things about the book. The mystery of the ceremonies themselves, the rituals, the way that it's all kind of adding up as you go through the book, what their culmination will be. It's again really intriguing, but it's dark and it's ominous, and it has a sense of real kind of ancient threat, and and a history that is connected back to the Brethren, this religious sect, and their forebears, their families. It goes way back, and all of that kind of the way that it all links together like that is really well done. Klein's writing style is quite elaborate. It's got a really lovely rhythm to it, and it's got a really lovely dark tone to it, a lot of weight to it. I found it incredibly easy to listen to, in terms of its, as I say, its rhythm, the way that its flow. It's very, very enjoyable to listen to. And he also seems to really know his stuff when it comes to Gothic literature. Klein does. There are plenty of references through Jeremy's kind of journal entries when he's talking about his work, that the stuff he's studying whilst he's at the farm. that we get from time to time. His plenty of references to, you know, horror stories, gothic horror stories, and writers. M.R. James pops up, which I was happy to hear. He's my favourite, one of my favourite short story writers from that sort of era. And then you've got Poe and Le Fanu, various others. But it's Machen, Arthur Machen, particularly a story called The White People, that dominates as an obvious influence with this. There are various quotes used as epigraphs at the beginnings of parts or chapters, I can't remember which. I did, after I finished reading this, go and read the Machen, The White People. Flipping weird. Very weird. And quite a difficult read for a short story. But you can see the influences, definitely, for sure. So if you do read this, I would recommend having a look at the Machen. It's quite an interesting thing to do. But yeah, I really enjoyed those references, generally speaking. There's some snark in there as well from Jeremy, and therefore possibly from Klein, I'm not sure, towards particular authors, that made me laugh. There was some good wit there. In terms of the actual like horror factor, the you know, scary factor, yeah, it definitely creeped me out. I was definitely kind of tense for most of it. The horror comes in both kind of a psychological horror and also in sort of a more physical form, if you like. I enjoyed the sense of unease, sort of, you know, paranoia, that was building and being felt by some of the characters. That build of that unease and how they had to kind of grapple with ideas of a potentially kind of ancient otherworldly evil that was beyond their kind of comprehension, you know, versus their belief in, you know, kind of tangible, scientifically proven things as modern city folk in the case of Jeremy. I really enjoyed that side of things, but the side that I enjoyed most was more kind of it was the unsettling kind of mystery of the ceremonies, the kind of the ritual folk side of things, and the unsettling occurrences of like strange behavior in animals, and kind of the almost parasitic nature of some of the stuff that happens, and the culmination of the story as well, at the end, which I won't spoil, obviously. All I will say is that as a waspophobe, I do not like wasps at all. There was one scene in the book which really made my skin crawl. That was actually really difficult for me to kind of to read, and was really well done. So yeah, really, really, really good book. I would thoroughly recommend this one if you've not read it. Okay, to sum up then, its strengths. It's one of these where I kind of feel like it has a lot of strengths to it. Its atmosphere is excellent. Its plot is really compelling, even though it's a very, very slow build. Its writing is extremely enjoyable, really great flow, really great imagery coming from it. Its character work is really interesting. It's a overall really strong book. I think for me, my favourite thing about it was the atmosphere that it evoked, though. Weaknesses wise, I can't really say that there's any weaknesses. There's some stuff I liked more than others, but I can't really pinpoint anything where I go, that was a bit off, that was a bit weak. So yeah, as I say, I loved this. I think I'll put it on the story graph as probably a 4.5 stars. I think my only, not niggle with it or anything like that, but it loses half a point just because I felt that the ending could have been maybe a little bit more impactful. But it wasn't bad by any means. And the journey to get there was all thoroughly enjoyable. Will I read more Klein? Yes, absolutely. So if you've got any recommendations for which Klein I should go for next, then do drop them below. So that's the first two novels of my 20th century British and American horror project then. I didn't expect them to have anything in common, to be honest, but in the end they did. The kind of the weirdness, elements of cosmic horror were shared, and I think they actually ended up going quite well together, these two. They felt like they paired quite well. Next up for this project then, this month, I will be reading Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury for my American pick. Really looking forward to that. And then The Haunting of Toby Jug by Dennis Wheatley for my British pick. The wrap up for those will come at some point in March. But that will do from me today. Thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, do drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you read either of these books or any other books by Hope Hodgson or Klein, as I say, anything you want to recommend, or any other authors that you think I might like based on how I got on with these two? Yeah, do let me know. I will be back on Friday with some more bookish ramblings, so I do hope you'll join me then. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.